everyone, welcome back to What's Cooking in Lakeville. I'm Jessica Bradley and I'm really excited to share these easy weeknight meals with you today. We're going to talk about one make-ahead meal that's one of our family's favorites, and it's kind of a new recipe that I've used for the past couple years. And then I'm going to show you a quick weeknight meal that's been a recipe that's been in my family for a really, really long time. And that's the one we're going to start with, and it's our homemade mac and cheese. And I think you're really, really going to love it. So the first thing we're going to do with the homemade mac and cheese is make a from scratch white sauce, which is going to turn into a cheese sauce, and it's really easy, so don't feel intimidated about it. What we're going to do is we're going to start with just a regular saucepan and some cold milk. I have 3 cups of cold milk right here. So I'm just going to add this to the saucepan. And to that, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. And you want to make sure you add this to the cold milk. Otherwise, you're going to get really lumpy white sauce. What we're going to do is we're going to whisk this together before we put it on the stove. And we're going to get it incorporated. That way we avoid any lumps. Okay. And then to this, we're going to add 6 tablespoons of butter. And then we're going to put it on the stove. And I have the heat on about medium, and we're just going to let that start to come together and whisk it as we go to avoid any lumps. Now, right over here, I have some boiling water. This is where we're going to pre-cook our pasta. And I'm going to add some salt to this because you want to flavor your pasta as it cooks. So this is 1 box of medium shells. And I'm going to cook this according to the package instructions, less a couple minutes, because it's going to finish cooking once we put it in the oven. So I'm going to set my timer for this for about 7 minutes. And I'll give this a quick stir. And this can cook along as we continue to make our cheese sauce. So I'm going to give my milk and butter a little stir to make sure no lumps are forming on the bottom. So the white sauce we're making here, which is the basis for our cheese sauce, is a very basic white sauce recipe. It's 1 cup of milk to 1 tablespoon cornstarch to 2 tablespoons butter. That's the ratio. What I've done here is I've tripled it. I have 3 cups of milk, 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and 6 tablespoons of butter. Just because that's the amount that I have found works well for this amount of macaroni and cheese. So we're going to let this do its thing. The butter's going to melt and it's going to start to come together. In the meantime, I'm going to prepare the cheese to add into the sauce. So I mentioned before that this is a recipe that's been in my family for a very, very long time. My dad ate this recipe when he was a kid, and my grandmother then taught my mom the recipe, and then my mom in turn taught us the recipe. So along the way, I've kind of made a couple little changes to it, but just updated it to our taste, and that's the recipe I'm going to show you today. So this macaroni and cheese starts with probably one of the least healthy ingredients that you can find in the grocery store, but I have not found anything that works better to make a creamy, smooth sauce. So it's 1 package of orange Velveeta cheese. And what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this up into blocks. And as that butter melts, we're going to add this in and let it come together in there with it. And it's not fancy. Oh, there's my pasta. Let me check on that. I think it needs a little more time, but let me double check. Ooh, that's hot. Actually, you know what? That's perfect. I'm going to take this off and drain it and set it aside for when we need it. This is a facial. So back to the cheese sauce. You know, this doesn't need to be pretty because it's just going to be melting right into the white sauce mixture. Okay. Oops, it's sticky. All right, let's bring this over and get it moving. So if my grandmother was making this recipe, this is where it would end. She would do the milk sauce mixture plus the Velveeta and some salt and pepper. But over time, I've decided to update the recipe a little bit to add some additional flavors that we really like, some additional cheese, and then some other flavors as well. So I'll show you guys those now. I really love to add a double cheddar or a cheddar jack mix. I think it adds just an additional depth of flavor to the macaroni and cheese. I also like to add Parmesan cheese because I like the sharpness of it. I like to add some Dijon mustard because, again, I like that sharpness and tanginess that it adds. And then a classic white sauce ingredient is nutmeg. And I like the warmth that that adds to the sauce. I'm just going to add these right over at the stove. This is a top of the stove type of meal. And from start to finish, this probably takes about, I don't know, half hour total, but you can put this together during the day when your kids are at school and then pop it in the oven for 20 minutes until it's bubbly and you have dinner. And it's easy actually to also add mix-ins to this. Sometimes we like to add like some steamed broccoli or some diced rotisserie chicken. Those are a couple favorites of our family. All right, let's mix in this cheddar. Now the Velveeta is melting nicely in here and it's super smooth and creamy. And that is the consistency I haven't been able to get with any other cheese besides this. We'll do that. We'll add about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. Like I said, I really like the tanginess that the Dijon gives to the cheese sauce. I'm going to crank this heat down a little bit because I don't want it burning on the bottom. Well, that's one of the tricks to this sauce is you have to kind of keep your eye pretty close on it so no burning occurs. Okay, then some Parmesan cheese. I probably like about a half a cup, quarter cup to a half a cup. It's not an exact science. A little bit of nutmeg. You can use ground nutmeg that's already ground. I like these little nuts. These are the actual nutmegs. And if you have like a little grater, or this is called a microplane, or something that you use to like zest citrus fruit, you can use that to grate the nutmeg. And it's just a little, you just want a little bit. It adds a subtle flavor. Okay, that's good. Perfect. Hit this with a little bit of salt. We don't want too much salt in this because the cheese is already really salty and we've already salted our pasta. So we want to make sure that we don't over salt this or it's not going to taste good. All right, let's see. Give this a good stir, and the last ingredient is just going to be some black pepper, a couple cranks. Okay. Now this sauce is almost done. It's coming to a little bit of a simmer. It's starting to bubble a little bit right around the edges, and that's what you want. You want it to just start to bubble. So while that finishes cooking, I'm going to prepare my pan. I just need to put some butter on it to make sure that the pasta doesn't stick to it, and then I'm going to add the pasta to it. All right, so what you want to do, I just have a little piece of butter. I just want to spread it along the bottom of the pan. It doesn't have to be perfect or neat. Funny story about this recipe, and one of my favorite stories ever about my dad is that when he was a kid, so he comes from a family of 7, and my grandmother was very strict about having dinner and finishing everything on your plate. But every kid was allowed one thing that they didn't have to eat, that they didn't like. And my dad didn't like this mac and cheese when he was growing up. So my grandmother would leave just one corner free of cheese and for my dad. And that was his one thing that he would choose. So she would make a whole pan of mac and cheese for everyone and one corner free for Dad that he would just eat plain old baked pasta. And so that was his one thing. Now, I mean, growing up, when I was growing up, he loved it. And now he loves it, obviously. All right, so I'm going to bring that sauce over. Now, this is really thick now. And you got to keep your eye on this because it can go past really fast. You don't want it to burn. So this sauce is awesome. It's really bubbling now. All we're going to do is pour this right over. How good does that look? I've never met a kid who doesn't love this. Or an adult for that matter. Okay, so you just want to move it around. Make sure the sauce gets all worked in to all areas of the dish. And I like a lot of sauce on my macaroni and cheese because that's the best part. But if your family thinks this is too much, you can just cut that recipe, just follow that same ratio that we talked about before. When I was a kid, we always ate this with crushed potato chips on top. My mom would put crushed potato chips and then put it in the oven. What we've started to do kind of in recent years, because we never really had potato chips in the house, but we always had goldfish crackers, was we would put crushed goldfish crackers on top, and it just adds like an extra little layer of crunchiness and cheesiness and saltiness, and the kids always thought it was fun, although this is kind of like this recipe coming full circle. My son Benjamin doesn't like the goldfish crackers on it, so I leave a little portion uncovered for him, kind of just like his papa didn't have any on his way back in the day. So, okay, so that looks good to me. So in the oven this goes just until it starts to bubble and get really ooey gooey, and then we'll pull it out. Right now, because this is hot, it's not going to take as long, but if you had made this during the day and kind of set it aside and put it in the oven for dinner when your kids got home from school, it would take a little bit longer. It would probably take about 20 minutes or so. This would probably take about 12 or so. So this is our family's favorite chili recipe, and it's super easy, it's super quick. It doesn't have a lot of ingredients, but it's a good basic chili recipe that you can take and keep it as is if you want, or eventually make it your own by adding additional ingredients or changing it up how you might want to. So the first thing we're going to start with is just, a good medium-sized onion and 5 good-sized garlic cloves. Oh, looks like I have 6 here, so it'll be a little extra garlicky. We're just going to chop this up, and we're going to get it going in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, which I have heating up in a Dutch oven on the stovetop. You don't have to use a Dutch oven if you don't have one. It's totally fine to do just in a regular soup pan or whatever type of pan you might have. And one other way, actually, I should tell you guys about this chili that you can use is a large, shallow pan, like a large, shallow saute pan, the ones that are about that deep. And if you do that, this recipe goes even faster. It's really good, actually, if you want to cook it on a weeknight and just have it done in like 20 minutes. So that's another good option for this recipe. Okay, so we're just going to cut this onion in like a rough dice. Okay, bring this over and get it going before I start crying. And while that starts cooking up, I'll dice the garlic up too. I don't know if I've showed you how I like to peel garlic before, but I'll show you now. A whole clove of garlic is really easy to peel. All you have to do is put it down on your board, take the flat side of your knife, put it on the garlic, and give it a good smash. It's a good way to get out of any frustration you might have too. Feels really good. So there we go. I like to smash them all at once and then peel the skins away. Just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so let's get those skins away and give it a nice little chop. Okay, you can hear the onions going, so I'm going to add the garlic to the pan. The onions and garlic are going. I'm just going to give it a quick stir. This is about 2 tablespoons of olive oil that I have going here. So we just want to get them started cooking, a little tiny bit browned, a little bit softened. Okay, it's about medium to medium-high heat. The next thing I'm going to add to this chili is the spices, and I'm actually going to add it. It's kind of unusual. I'm going to add it at this point because I want to toast those spices up a little bit. I feel like it gives it a really good depth of flavor. What I like to put in this chili is my favorite combination of spices are a couple tablespoons of chili powder, a couple teaspoons of cumin, about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning or oregano, whatever you might have in your pantry, and then some salt and pepper. So I'm going to add the spices, give them a stir, and it really is very fragrant when you do this, and you can see the beautiful red color. Okay. I do about 2 teaspoons of salt because you're flavoring the entire pot, so you want to make sure it has enough flavor. And then about a teaspoon, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of black pepper. An easy way to add additional spice to this would be to add some cayenne pepper, and however much you like. So that's one of the good things about this recipe is you can kind of customize it to what you want. The next thing that's going to go in is our meat, and I'm going to be using an 85% ground beef, so it's 85-15. You can also use a 93-7. You could also use ground turkey. If you're going to use ground turkey, my only suggestion would be to not get the ground turkey breast. It just doesn't have enough fat and it doesn't impart enough flavor into the chili. So let's grab the beef. The other thing I'm going to grab right now is one of the ingredients that adds the liquid to the chili, which is a bottle of beer. And right here I have an ale. That's my favorite beer to put in here. You can use any type of beer that you want. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to start to break up the meat so it can start to cook and lose its pink color. And all the flavors can start to marry with the onions and the garlic and the spices. You can break down this meat as you want. Some people like chili that has little tiny pieces of meat in it. Our family likes bigger chunks. My daughter in particular kind of likes a little bit of a bigger chunk of meat. So she likes to pick around the beans and the other stuff and likes the meat and the tomatoes. So I tend to leave it like a little bit like bite-sized chunks. But if your family likes it nice and broken down, then just continue to break it up with your spatula. You can see that the meat is starting to brown. It's really sizzling now, and it's releasing, the onions and the meat are all releasing some of their juices in here. So this is all starting to come together and cook really, really meld and cook together. I'm going to add next a couple tablespoons of tomato paste. I love, love, love this delivery application of tomato paste. It's the best because, you know, they've always come in those little cans and you use 1 tablespoon and then you go, what the heck am I going to do with the rest of this? And it ends up going to waste. This tube is awesome because you can squeeze it out however much you want, put it back in the fridge, and you don't have to waste any of it. So this is it's going to be about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste to this. So the chili's cooking really good over there. It's sizzling and going away, and this would be the time to add the beer. I really love this particular type of beer because it has a unique connection to our family. The brewery where it came from in Vermont was directly across the street from where my husband grew up. So it's really fun. And those are the types of things that make cooking like really fun and unique. But again, this is an amber ale and you can use any type that you want. Okay, so this is gonna cook for a couple minutes. We're going to cook some of the alcohol off. We're just going to bring it to a bubble and let it go. When you add the beer in, you want to scrape the bottom of the pan that you're cooking your chili in because it will scrape up any of those yummy bits that might have cooked onto the bottom. While I'm right here, I'm going to take a minute and check my mac and cheese because I can smell it and I think it might be done. This looks amazing. This is exactly how it should look. Bubbling, a little bit crunchy along the outside. Delicious. Okay, let's pull this out. Now this is gonna have to sit, definitely, for at least a few minutes before you eat it. I would say a good solid 10 minutes because you're gonna do some damage to yourself if not. As the beer cooks off on the chili a little bit, I'm gonna show you the rest of the ingredients. that we have to prepare for the chili. So right here I have 1 can of black beans that I've drained and then rinsed of all that really thick viscous liquid that they come packed in. It's full of salt, so you don't want to add that extra salt to your chili. So I'm going to put this in here. And then I also have 1 can of dark red kidney beans that I'm going to also rinse and drain right now. Okay. And just rinse them under cold water until all that liquid is rinsed out. Now, if you don't like black beans or you don't like red beans, add a different kind. You could add pinto beans, you could add light red kidney beans, you could leave the beans out if you didn't want it. And one other thing I wanted to add was that if you wanted to add peppers or any other types of vegetable that you like, this is a great basic chili recipe to be able to do that. So over to the stove to add the last couple ingredients. The beans and 1 can of whole tomatoes in their juice. And I'll show you what we're going to do with the tomatoes. This is the point that you really want the chili to be at before you add the tomatoes. It's had a chance to really bubble, a little bit of that alcohol from the beer has evaporated off, and it's really starting to come together. What I like to do first with the tomatoes is drain the can right into the pot. That's all the juice. Okay. Now this gets messy. I think I have never, ever, ever done this without getting tomato juice on myself, but we'll try this time. Oops, I might have just done it right there. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the tomatoes and we're just gonna break them up by hand into the chili. That way you get nice kind of irregular chunks and it just makes for a really yummy chunky chili. And be careful because they're juicy inside. The seeds go everywhere. Okay. If you didn't want to do this, you could just add a can of diced tomatoes, but I really like the texture that this adds to the chili. Give this a stir. There was 1 tomato that fell in there that I got to break up. Okay. There we go. It looks rich and chunky and really, really good. I'm just going to add the beans in. Give it a gentle stir because you don't want the beans to break up too much. Okay. At this point, all the chili has to do is simmer for the flavors to come together. So it's only been about 15 minutes and we've put this whole thing together. You let it simmer for about 10 minutes and then dinner is ready. And it's great. I love making this pot, like I said, on a football Sunday or over the weekend in preparation for the week, because then if you don't even if you don't eat it over the weekend, you can take this, cool it down, separate it into different containers with labels and have easy pull out of the freezer meals for the next week or even the week after that. It's very, very simple. And it always tastes really good reheated. This chili looks perfect. It's been cooking for about 10 minutes. It's had a chance to come together. All the flavors have melded. Let's serve it up, take a bite, and see what it's all about. My favorite part is the chunky tomatoes, so I always make sure I get lots of that. Now this chili isn't a super thick chili, but that's what we like about it. We like that it's a little bit more soupy. But the longer you cook it, the thicker it gets. So if you like a thicker chili, then cook it for a little bit longer. What I like to serve the chili with, the kids love and we love, is a little bit of shredded cheese on top, a dollop of guacamole on top, and just some yummy corn chips around the edge. It's so pretty and it tastes so good. The cheese adds some creaminess and the guacamole a little bit of tanginess. It cuts through the richness of the chili. It's really, really yummy. Now I'm super excited to show you guys what this macaroni and cheese looks like. I love this recipe so much because it makes me feel connected to my grandmother, and I envision my dad and his brothers and sisters sitting around their table, And it reminds me of my own childhood. It's just one of those, you know, one of those recipes that where tradition meets modern day. Yum. Creamy, salty, little crunchy on top. So, so good. And what I do like to usually serve with this macaroni and cheese is just a really, really simple salad of some crispy, like maybe romaine lettuce dressed with some lemon and olive oil and salt and pepper. I find that the acidity of the salad cuts through the richness of the mac and cheese, and it's just a really yummy combination together. So, and it's a perfect, easy weeknight meal that you can prepare in advance during the day, pop in the oven 20 minutes before dinner, and have it ready to go. So let's taste it. Really hot. It's like being a kid again. Yum. And this is kind of how I like to eat my chili, with a chip. You know, you could always go for a spoon, but it's more fun with a chip. Get some beans, some tomato, some guac. Really, really good. I hope you try these make ahead recipes. I hope your family loves them as much as ours does. Thanks. We'll see you next time.